Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we have Nick Jushchyshyn. Nick is head of the, I don't know exactly how to, it's head of visual effects or in immersive at Drexel. What's your title, Nick?
It's director of VR and immersive media and
Okay.
Virtual production.
And Doug, general 3D visual effects guru. So Nick, we're gonna be we're gonna have Nick on hopefully every month or close to every month just to do Q&A. He'll talk about some of the stuff that he's working on in immersive, in VR, in 3D. Answer your questions about those things, and I think that we'll probably collect a couple other people to start being part of those conversations. So it should be a fun Wednesday, at least once a month that we're doing. So we're having a chat with Nick today. So that's coming up in the second hour. We have Todd Raines tomorrow. He's going to talk about wood turning, streaming wood turning, which is going to be really cool. And then, of course, on Saturday we have education. So we have 2 hours of education, and we're still working on the third hour, but we'll hopefully have that soon. And that's it. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
Well, our first one is going to create a ruckus here. Chad Lafarge says, can I ask if Jeffrey Powers is aware of any birthdays today?
Is it your birthday, Jeffrey?
No, let's see. It's Edgar Allan Poe's birthday today. And it's Dolly Parton's birthday today. And it's Janis Joplin's birthday today. Okay. I don't think any of them has been on this panel, so I don't know.
I guess that was I don't know what that was connected to then. Is it anybody's birthday today?
The only people who know what birthday Edgar Allan Poe has are people who have the same birthday.
Yes.
You've been decoded.
Jeffrey, it is your birthday today, isn't it?
It is not only my birthday, it is my 50th.
Wow. All right. Okay. I'll start it. Stand by, everyone. You just gotta try to sing with me because I'll be a little ahead. And I just said, there we go. Ready and happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jeffrey. Happy birthday to you. There we go.
Many more.
Proper train wreck. Now, the key, by the way, I've been thinking about this a lot, is that you cannot, as a panelist, happy birthday, Jeffrey, happy 50th. You cannot, as a panelist, make anything up. So the way this works, I think that we're getting closer, but nobody can do anything other than just sing the song. And the person leading it has to go slow. And then everyone just has to follow that exactly. And I bet you it'll sink right in. If anybody does any kind of like variation or additive or anything else, it creates confusion in the system. But I think we're getting closer. I think our birthday thing is getting closer. But I think that's the key: is one person has to lead it. Everyone just follows and does the very standard whatever. We can build from there. But I think that sometimes we want to be creative, and if you get creative, it doesn't work because we barely have the basic one working. It's a good lesson in live streaming: is don't do anything creative until you get the basic part fixed. But happy birthday, Jeffrey.
I love how you said, thank you. I love how you said the key, because there is no key.
There were many keys. What are you talking about?
Hey, it's the only key we have. We have to grab onto it because we have to claim a key. Anyway, so are you planning anything big for your 50th birthday, Jeffrey?
No, last night I attended a jam session. We played a lot of bass, played a lot of piano. That was a lot of fun. But today is just kind of low key because, we had cake yesterday because Jennifer has to work today. So
I will note at that tempo, it's kind of a birthday dirge. So
it was in the key of fail. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Next question.
Moving on. Tony Mobley, Noonan, Georgia, is up next. Can Alex explain how to bring in multiple live video in Keynote?
Yeah, so I showed this yesterday on Mac Break, and we showed it on Saturday on the Education Hour. Let me cut to this. So this is what Tony was talking about, and what we can do here is I'll just show you an example of it. So this is live video. You can see me talking into it. If I hit the next button here, these are actually all live video cameras. So I have on this Mac Mini, I'm running out of the ability to do any more than 4. So we'll see if I can make that better. But 4 is the max on the Mac Mini currently. But you have all the power that you would have normally in Keynote. So if I hit the next button, those are the magic move that you would see in Keynote. This is the, a transition that you would see in Keynote. So all of those things are things that you can actually do. You basically have all the power that you would have inside of Keynote. Now, if you want to add something else, when you want to add this, all you got to do, if we add the slide, if I go into media and say I want to add a live video, that just grabs onto the default camera right now. So that's my default camera. My daughter paints rocks. Anyway, but I have all these other ones. You can add a live source here, or you can use the ones that are already there. So if I click on this one, it'll just switch to me. So you can decide what you want to be there as you go through it. So that's pretty much it. And then after that, this is just another object that just happens to have live video in it. And it's pretty, it's pretty revolutionary to be able to, just go, okay, well, I want this. And then again, you can treat this like an object. So I can say, I want this video to have a picture frame. And maybe I want it to be, let's see, we'll give it, there's the little, that's actually not that interesting. Hold on. We'll give it the little this, and then we'll give it a drop shadow, and then we'll give it a, let's see, we'll leave it there. And so you have all, and give it a little reflection. You can if I go in here and back to the live video and I hit, let's see, go back to the ATEM, you can see that the live reflection is my live video, so there's a lot that's going on, with that, but you're just able to treat it like any other object inside a Keynote. And so for presentations, we really think this could be a real, interesting possibility, because you can do kind of the picture in picture, but as you saw before, I can animate that picture in pictures. I can do so I can have me being full screen and then slide over to here, then slide back over to somewhere else, all while I have graphics all around me. So it's pretty slick little setup here. So, whoops. There we go. Anyway, so that's how that works. Hold on, let me. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, after watching that demo, I feel much better about my life, because your desk looks a lot like mine.
Yeah, exactly. It's well, and the funny thing is
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, I got all kinds of wires sitting in front of me, and
Mine looks like
half
a
of
riot.
them. The funny thing is, half of them were generated by the webcams that are designed to show the thing, because there's all these googly, I had all these. Yeah, but it's a messy.
Considering in Keynote, you can jump between slides.
Yep.
Like you could jump from slide 1 to slide 4. You could, in theory, make a 4-page slideshow, 4 slides. Yeah. Have one camera full screen on one camera full screen. You can make a switcher out of Keynote.
Well, and also you could do more than that. You could do 2-ups and 4-ups and everything else, and be switching between all of them, and just be cut. Yeah, the hard part would be like interactive things, like other layers of lower thirds or other things, unless you'd have to kind of burn those in. But the yeah, exactly. But it is. I mean, again, this is version 1. So there's a lot of, there's a lot. I'm playing for this year to be the number 1 contributor to suggestions for Keynote, in the little send your feedback. Because when I realized I didn't have to fill out the whole thing, I only had to fill out like 4 or 5 different pieces. When I'm working in Keynote, I probably send 3 or 4. Like
They call him Radar Lindsay.
Yeah, and so I'm sending all these things like, the video would be really good if I could do this. Now that we do this, we should do green screen. Like my big thing was like, we should do, I sent the feedback in. If you can do live video, we should be able to do live green screen, so it would overlay over top of it. And I was like, iMovie was able to do that in real time in 2008.
So what you need to do is you need to make friends with the people that read those comments. I'm going to let you in on a secret here. I actually have a code that when I put that code in for Final Cut comments, it gets pushed to the top and read immediately.
I hear that the rumor that I hear is that all the teams read, literally. There's somebody reading all the comments. It's not like they're getting lost.
I will tell you this: absolutely everything gets read. I know again in the Final Cut team, I know the people that do it.
Yeah,
they're dedicated, they're passionate, they're driven. Yeah. And they take it very, very seriously. There's a whole hierarchy. I will tell you that you doing it is good, but you getting all of us to do it is better.
Yeah,
they weight things by how many people actually asked
Right.
for something.
yeah. I haven't started engaging us in that process yet, but swarming. We did do that. That's how Universe supports Liminal. Was that
That took like a week too.
Yeah, well, it
was
took a week to
fast.
support Liminal because they got more. We sent more requests in 15 minutes than they had gotten in the history of the company. When we flipped that switch, like we definitely had their undivided attention. They were like, "Who are these people?" Anyway, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I was curious if you've tried that feature in Keynote with virtual inputs at all, like NDI.
It doesn't
or anything
work
like that.
Yeah, so this is the number one problem with Keynote at the moment, in my opinion, is that it does not see virtual inputs and it does not send to virtual inputs. And so if you don't, so we can't send it out. You have to do some kind of screen scrape or something like that to get it out. So like when I'm showing you what I just showed you, that's going to a switcher out of the HDMI output from the computer. So that is the number one thing that isn't working. I think that they'll solve it. Like I think that they'll solve it. It's because the problem is so obvious, and I can see why they didn't do it on version 1, but I think within a year we'll have it. That's my guess. I mean, I'm just guessing because it's an obvious miss. It's like the most obvious thing to solve right now. Go ahead, Sky.
I just want to confirm what piece of equipment that you're using and what version of the software. And could I do that trick on a MacBook 2019?
You should be able to. It could push the 2019 pretty hard if you start putting 4 inputs into it. I'm using an M1 with 8 gigs of RAM. So not anything like a real base M1 Mac Mini is what I'm pushing in. I am going to take right now when I put the 5th web input, the 5th camera input into it, everything freezes. Like it just goes, I can't do this anymore. And it doesn't seem to be any, but what I'm going to try to do is get the 16 gig one and find out, does that fix it? Like, does the more RAM fix that problem? And then we'll know whether that makes a difference or not. And so, yeah, but
then you got a dongle for all your USB connections, or some kind of bridge.
Yeah, I have the Saatchi little thing underneath. So I can put 2 of the webcams go in that way. One webcam goes in the back, and the other one goes through USB-C to the ATEM Mini. So I have an ATEM Mini. That's my main feed, to do it. So I could theoretically have 4 more inputs there that I switched, to make that work as well. So those are a couple different things. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, here's a suggestion for you. They have all those little sliders and things where you can add reflections and little corner pieces to the visual. Mm-hmm. How about a slider that adjusts the latency of the sound so it puts it back in sync with the video? Because you seem to be about 4 or 5 frames out of sync when you would show your live video in Keynote. So just build a delay in with a slider.
The problem is right now is that my audio and my video are in completely different pipelines. So they're, because it's not even going, that computer isn't even on the same computer
we're hearing you still through the same Zoom input, but it's not coming through Keynote first.
Right. Yeah. So it's that would be an issue, and we have to. I'm still working on the sync issue. Go ahead, Chris.
I will admit that before office hours, I didn't know what a virtual camera was, and based on some of the video streams we see coming out of Apple, maybe they just haven't heard of virtual cameras either. It's possible.
Well, definitely, we're yeah. So I mean, that's the next thing. But I think that they'll figure it out because it's just an obvious problem. I mean, once people see it, they immediately want to use it. Once they use it, they realize they're missing that thing. Like, how do I get this in? Next question.
Comes to us from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. He says, does anyone know the tech details of what Tony Robbins events and other large virtual speaking events look like? I wonder if we have anyone.
I go with Sky.
Okay, thank you. I was very fortunate. Jeff Keefley brought Doug Ferguson and I and his lovely wife into the behind the scenes of that experience. I don't think I'm giving any trade secrets away that a year ago, Tony Robbins' organization bought a facility in Florida and moved from California to a large space that is now 2 giant screens. I don't know, Doug, maybe you can help me with the size of that. But the event that I participated way in the background of doing a breakout room manager had over 5,000 people connected for sometimes 14 hours a day for up to 6 days in a row. So, and it didn't fail, but there was a lot of behind the scenes people, both on the ground, but around the world, connecting those people for that Tony Robbins event. Yeah, it was a thing.
Yeah, we've talked about some of those pieces in the past. I mean, those are big. I believe that they're currently using Disguise to map all of that out. So I think Disguise is the software that they're, and that's what most people are using. And so there's different. They started off in a different format, but I think that they're now using Disguise for that to do that, and that's a mapping software that will push those things out and push everybody out into those areas. And then there's a lot of computers, like a lot of computers on the back end, because you have to put to have access to all those windows. You have to have a lot of, you have to be able to grab onto each individual person, potentially take the grid view and subdivide it and put it out there to do it. So those are, and some folks are doing that with 2D software. Some people are doing that with Unreal, because you can take something with Unreal, you can take a gallery that we see here and just chop it up. Say, I just want to grab these little bits and take each one of those and make them a texture map and then throw them onto a polygon. And now you have control of those polygons. Even if you don't show them in 3D, you can do whatever you want with them in 2D, sitting, being rendered live in front of you. So anyway, so those are some of the things that are used there. And then, all of that but those are the big pieces of that puzzle. Go ahead, John.
Hey, Alex, I remember Jeff talking briefly about how they're approaching the hybrid, where they've got the in-studio audience now, and the screen raises above so that they can see the audience behind. Did they get any further articulation on what they're planning to do in hybrid events?
Well, they want to try to do both events together. I think Tony Robbins can pull that off because he's Tony Robbins. I don't think it's a good idea. Like for general use, they want to be able to bring the screen down, then pull it back up, and then interact with people. But hybrids always create two minds. You're always talking to one. And I think that if almost anybody other than Tony Robbins did it, they would get less and less viewership on the online. Like, it's just, Tony Robbins can get away with all kinds of things because he's Tony Robbins, and so that doesn't mean that everyone should learn how to, just because a certain football player knows how to do a certain thing doesn't mean everybody should do it that way, because maybe they only have the body for that, or the skill to do that. Tony Robbins is a force of nature. He can get away with a lot of things. But as a model, I don't think it works. Like, I don't think that, and even when I saw it, I was like, I would hate to be in the room with that. You pay a lot of money, and now he's talking to somebody else somewhere else. I mean, I would be like, it would be the last time I'd go to anything like that if I went to it. I'd be like, this isn't worth it. And the same thing. And that's what we have to see with what he does, whether it's not what happens in the first couple, because people will just join because it's Tony Robbins. 2 years from now, we should see where he's at, and whether people are still paying the money that they need to pay to be in the room, whether they're still paying to be in the, in the online. Maybe he just can do enough marketing to constantly bring new people in, but it's not a good format. I mean, I can just look at it and tell you I would, never want to do it. But of course, I'm not the person, because I wouldn't do anything that made me get up and jump around in front of a camera. So it's probably not my cup of tea either way. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I'm showing a picture of the screen in the live audience of the event that Sky and I did. And that whole screen moves up and down. Yeah. And then he has one on the backside as well. So
it's really cool.
It was very cool.
But I think that there's less to learn than we think from that. Like, how could we do that? Because we should never do that. Like, in my opinion, like, I think that unless you're Tony Robbins or someone very close to his ability to hold the space, I don't think you could pull it off. Go ahead, Noah.
Well, I'll definitely put it in as second hour suggestions and see how people respond to it. Obviously, Alex has some great viewpoints and a great perspective on it with the experience he has. But I'm sure there are other people who could be or would be interested in that, and to see how it's set up. So it's definitely not necessarily a direction everybody needs to go in, but it doesn't hurt us to see what they're doing and how they're doing it. So if Doug or other people who have that knowledge can share it, first of all, that would be the first caveat. And then if people actually are interested in it, we'll see.
I'm happy to show these things. I'm just saying, I've done over 1,000 hybrid events over the last decade. And so I have it's not like I have an assumption that I look at something and go, oh, I don't think that would work. I have done in the round, and, I've done like so many things with so many budgets, not Tony Robbins budgets, but big budgets for this kind of thing. And it just, when we look at the real data of the back end, it's stunningly depressing. You know, when you actually look at how long people stayed and everything else. Tony Robbins, again, has a model that works. It's just that nobody else has that model. Go ahead, Chris.
I totally know what you're going to say because we've had this discussion many times, but let me just bring up football 1 second. You said if I was at that event and he started talking to people on the screen, was the last time I would pay for that event. People spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go to football games, and yet they stop the entire game for 2 to 3 minutes for a commercial timeout. And if you think about it, like that's the rudest thing you can do after you've asked all these people to drive across town, fly across the country, stand in line, park in the thing, you know, pay $7 for a beer. And then I'm going to, oh, hold on. There's another, 20 million people actually watching on TV, and we're going to play them some commercials right now. And the whole game comes to a complete halt. So it's an interesting analog about how, again, going back to the ultimate virtual event or hybrid event, how do you entertain these people? How do you pay for these people? If you had asked somebody 100 years ago, hey, would you go to a game where they just stop the game for seemingly no reason at all? People would say, no, you're nuts. And in other countries, they do say that about American football.
As you know, I'll say two things. One is the
gobs
players
of money.
Well, no, number one is if you calculate the cost of the staff involved, for the game, you're talking about $50 million a show. Like, so $50 million for every football game. If you look at how much the players are getting paid and their staff and the prep and then the game, I mean, the game itself is millions, just in production, but the, it's a staff of whatever, 150, 200 people just to shoot the thing, and so sure, like you can overwhelm lots of bad ideas with money and talent. So you can because I can tell you that if the talent is like 2 steps below the talent that we watch on football, we'd stop watching too. Like, you look at AFL and the UFL and all the other ones that started, that they got people that were, some of the best players in the world, but not the best players in the world. And do you know how long that lasted? Like 10 seconds. And so, we're looking at, some of the finest athletes in the world, doing what they're doing something that's dangerous. And so that gets over a lot of other humps, and we add, for the online audience, we add a ton of graphics and incredible, commentary. And, most of the commentators, they, when an NFL player leaves and wants to be a commentator, that's like a year of training. Like for them to do that, like they go through, tons and tons and tons of training, and then most of them wash out. The Chris Collinsworth and Tony Romo got through that puzzle. But watch Monday Night Football and see how, the commentate. I don't mean to say it this way, but the commentation is not the same as Sunday Night Football and anything that Tony Romo does. So the point is that we've added enormous amounts of value to it. So you're absolutely right that you can pull off a hybrid event. It is the ultimate hybrid event. But it is, again, it's an enormous amount of talent and enormous amount of money that makes that work. And you drop it down only a couple notches and no one's going to watch it. And so when average corporations say, well, I want to do a hybrid event. Okay, well, you're a high school team. Like, are you really going to get that many people to watch your to watch your high school football game? That's the issue. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm kind of emphasizing a little bit about what Alex is saying on a part of this. I was really fortunate early in my career. I got a gig working for the National Speakers Association. They're based not too far from where I used to live. And I got to watch over the course of the next maybe 7 or 8 years a cavalcade of some of the best presenters in the world, at least working in the U.S. on the circuit. And I also got to watch a lot of them that were below the level of the top people. And so it was fascinating to me to see all sorts of different public speakers being very good at what they do, some of them excellent, but looking at also the deficiencies. Some of the best speakers could only do their signature speech really brilliantly. They couldn't really go off script and sustain it. And so you get people, and I think what Alex is saying in part is that a Tony Robbins has this combination ability to follow a script, to get where he's going, but also if anything comes in, suddenly change and make it every bit as compelling as if he was still on the script and had learned it. It's the difference between maybe a Shakespearean actor knowing the soliloquy and a stand-up comic. And while you get a lot of people who perform, there's only one like Robin Williams type who has that special ability to both get the core content out, but in the case anything goes wrong, be there in the moment and elevate to the next level. And those are the kind of people that you just don't get to work with very often. They are very rare ducks.
Yeah, and that's my point is mostly that when we think about talking about these events, we want to think about how do we build a system that almost anybody who has knowledge can be successful in. So I'm a knowledge expert. I want to be successful in this. I have I have a thing I want to talk about, whether it's medicine or business models or bikes or whatever it is. I'm not that kind of presenter. I'm not a Tony Robbins, but I have a deep skill set. We need to figure out a way. The reason that I push back so hard on this is because we need to build a system and a process in which someone who has the smarts, but not necessarily the above average, ability to present, but not a Tony Robbins level person, can be successful. And I believe that that's possible. When we go to virtual events and we engage things like Mukana and we're able to create interactive events where that person is able to shine by simply being smart, and we can build a system by which they can be successful, then we have something that is truly engaging. When we try to build it around high-end talent and lots of money, it's a more exclusive club than we think. Like, that is a really exclusive club, and that's not, I will argue that that's not something that we as producers want to build a business model around, because that's not a business model. Because when those people are that level of talent, they're also a very limited number of people that they'll hire to do it because, so it's something that we just want to be careful of selling to our clients, because they will fail. You're literally pushing clients over a cliff because most of them will not be capable of it. I mean, like, most of the Apple presenters, Apple makes the best keynotes in the world, but if they weren't releasing something great, you would never listen to half the people that are on that screen, because they, they're not that compelling. They're good people and they're smart people, but they're not actors. They're not presenters. There's executives that are doing the best they can. We need to build ways that they can be successful, not ways that someone who is, top 0.0000001% can be successful. Go ahead, Sky, real quick.
Yes, thank you. Very quick. Two things. Tony Robbins has been doing this for 40 years, so he's got a repertoire of, to Bill's point, things that he can pull off the shelf. B, is it scripted? Absolutely. C, there's an entire infrastructure of those 5,000 humans are shepherded, are managed, are intimately in small pods and felt an intimacy. Then they will all join in the big thing, but then they'll all do breakout groups into the 150 down to 5. So to your Pixel Core concept of, these people are here to learn. While it feels like a performance, it's more of a coaching. And again, he's a motivational speaker. So you're there not to be entertained, but to receive and get better for yourself.
And I even see motivate, and he's also 6'7" and bigger than life, and I see other motivational speakers that are good in the room and they can't carry a camera, can't carry on with the camera. So it's a really hard thing to do. Next question.
Next one comes from Mitchell Hill here on the panel from Wilmington, Delaware. And he says, I have an extensive TM Gold Disc music library stored on CD. I've been transferring everything over to 44.1 PCM WAV files. Would this be the best storage format to get everything off of CD?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it depends on your purpose. It would get it all off at exactly the same sound that it is stored as. 44.1 16-bit is what all CDs use. So it would be an exact copy of what's on the CD if you use that PCM WAV format. You could transfer it to broadcast WAV. The only difference is have a little bit different header information in the WAV files, like time code, or you could store a little bit of metadata on top of the file in a Q chunk, or if you make it into a B wave, a broadcast wave file, you have a little more place to store metadata. But if you want to save space, I don't know. I've transferred a lot of music that I just, for personal listening, to WMA files, which I think sound better than MP3 files for half the bit rate. So half the bit rate WMA files sound the same as like a 128-bit or 320-bit MP3 file. So yeah, if you want to keep them exactly the same, pull them off in 44.1. You could transfer them to FLAC if you want to save about 50% of the space, but that will give you the same quality with half the space.
Good, Mitchell.
I guess the objective is over the years, being a radio guy, saving up a lot of CDs. And the TM library I'm referring to used to be a library that they would sell in different genres. They no longer do it, but I do have most of them. You know, everything from rock and roll to top 40 to AOR to country to jam and gold. The thought occurred to me at one point that I want to be able to have use of these files a little bit more easily than being on a CD, and CDs aren't necessarily lasting that long. So the idea is, Courtney was suggesting, is that transferring them to a WAV file, but with having a cart chunk information in there, the metadata, so that I can display the artist title, the album, the UPC codes, and everything like that. So essentially, because of the cost of storage now, there's absolutely no reason at all to not save files as PCM, linear PCM files, because hard drives are just so cheap. So there's no reason to use MP3 or FLAC or any of the lossy formats out there. So I just got a big bucket of files that I've now transferred or transferring from my my old TM library, so that I have them so I can play them back or manipulate them or do whatever I want to do.
Yeah, Bill, real quick.
If it was me, I'd transcode them to 48 kilohertz only because that's the digital video standard, and I don't expect to use music on anything but visual content going forward. And I would make sure that that transcode, which most of the NLEs will do, was done well. I mean, most of the algorithms in there for pulling up 44.1 to 48 are actually very, very good. But that's what I do for future use.
Yeah, I'd probably pull it as the original 44.1 PCM to that'd be my first pass, and then I just run it through a compression scheme to get to 48. You know, like just run it through something that'll code it to 48. Then I would use the 48s, but I still have the 44.1s that were in folders from each CD, and then I'd put the CD somewhere safe. But the CDs also won't last. The 10-year life cycle, and then after that they start to flake. Next question.
Hey, Mitchell's in Washington says, can the Honorable Mr. Fenwick explain framing again for the show and discuss this among the panelists?
I think we'll have to go that. We'll send that back to Mr. Mitchell's because Mr. Fenwick's not here right now. Next question.
Next question coming up on there is from Tony Mobley, our friend in Noonan, Georgia. And he says, I have added Apple TV to my ATEM Mini Pro. Does the panel have any suggestions as to what I should do next?
I'll go with Guy.
I like the Sienna app. It's for bringing in NDI sources. So this opens up just a whole nother world because you can bring in cameras, you can do scan converter, you can bring in screens, and it's also to where you don't have to use the remote. You can actually open up a web interface. So if you get the app, and it is expensive. So, well, it depends on what you call expensive, but it's an expensive app, $99, but it turns an Apple TV into what Bird Dog's selling, I think, for $149. So it just depends on what you want to do. And once you buy it once, you can install it on as many Apple TVs as you want. So that's a huge benefit.
Go, Rupert.
I was going to say actually exactly Guy's suggestion. It's very versatile thing, and it is valuable if you've got more than one Apple TV and you can use it more than once, like Guy says. Then it gives you a little extra bang for buck there.
I go with Jason.
The only thing that I would add to that almost complete answer is that be sure to use Ethernet if you can. That's going to definitely make it a lot more sturdy.
Courtney.
Yeah, and you have to strip off the HDCP, I believe. Doesn't the Apple TV automatically support HDCPs?
Only if the content has it.
The contents. So if the content copyright bit is set, it's going to blank it out. So you might want to run it through a splitter that will defeat HDCP, and that way you can see all of your content that you want to bring in.
No, absolutely. And I just use it with my iPhone as a wireless camera receiver. So I just do an AirPlay from my with Filmic Pro. And it's full screen. And if you watch me on the cooking show when I'm showing close-ups, that's all I'm doing. Nothing complicated with the Apple TV. I just have it plugged into my ATEM as a wireless input. So that's how I handle it. Next question.
Next one from Jack B. in Phoenix, Arizona. Jack says, what over-the-ear headphones do you wear all day that do not leave marks on your head or make you sweat?
Go ahead, John.
Tucker and I use the same headphones, Ultrazones. Mine are Pro 550s. They cover the entire ear, unlike many headphones that go on top of the ear, which drives me crazy. These are pretty good headphones. They're made in Germany.
Go ahead, Bill.
I use the standard Sony 7506s, and you replace the initial pads, which last about the first 4 or 5 years and do perfectly well, with soft pads. There's a big aftermarket for the 7506's accessories because they're sold by the cartload all around the world. They're not perfectly flat. I wouldn't use these for listening to music all day long, but for any kind of work, they're fabulous because they have a little tiny presence peak right around human speech. It makes it easy to do editing and things like that when people are talking.
And I have to admit, for all day use, I use in-ears all the time. Like I don't, for when I need to critically listen to something, I go over the ear, and I have some AKGs and some high-end AKGs that I use. For that, I can't remember what the model number is, and I don't have them sitting right in front of me. But yeah, I think that in-ear, I find in-ear, once you get used to it, I think it took me a little while to get used to them, but I got, 20 years ago. And after that, I stopped putting over the ears because I don't like all the marks and the sweat, exactly what you're talking about. Next question.
Next question comes to us from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he says, Owen JJ Stone did an episode of TWIT recently, This Week in Tech, as a Memoji. How could he have accomplished this?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So basically what you would want to do, and I'm just trying to create this really quick, is what I would do is I would actually create the Memoji, grab the Memoji, and then create it in Photoshop with the different layers. And then I'd bring it into something like a character animator, just like this, where I'd just map my face and then go from there. So I could move it around, because you could do a lot of different things with it from character animator right there. So that's how I'd do it.
I'm going to show you the way that I would probably approach this. So we cut this to here. What you can use, what Apple is designed to use, is use clips. So if you go into clips here, you'll see me here. And then if I hit this little star, I can choose me. And I can push this down. So you'd have to cut the other part of it. You'd have to cut the other the debris around this. I don't know how to do this without a clean interface. So you can record this, of course, but then of course you can be any Memoji you want. There's me as my wife, and but also you can do anything else you want once you get this in here. You can be fish are our friends. Fish are not food. Anyway,
yes, but can you be Judge Cat?
Yeah, exactly. I think you could be Judge Cat. Is there a cat in here? There we go.
Yeah, there's a cat, I think.
I am not a cat. See, so anyway, so it's a matter of getting this video out the way you saw it here. What's interesting is when I turn it sideways, it just turns sideways there. So I don't know if that would be a way that you do it. I couldn't quite get clips to give me anything else from there. But anyway, I'm not a cat. That's all I got. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, another tool, I mentioned this, a couple of weeks ago now, but it's called Snap Camera. And so I'm demoing it now, and hopefully I don't look too strange, but it kind of does face animations and that kind of stuff too. You can pick different filters. I guess I could show the screen too. Let me get that going. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, you basically can pick the different.
That looks frighteningly good, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, with good lighting. Oops, sorry. Let me get that back to my camera.
I'm expecting you to go save the princess now.
Is it getting the lighting from you? Is it actually pulling the lighting from you?
I think so. I'll move around and kind of animate my face a little bit so you can kind of see what that looks like. But I mean, the compositing is pretty gnarly, and I'll see if I can find another skin real quick. I haven't previewed any of these, so if it looks kind of funky, that one's not as good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Oh, look at that. I should be doing this.
Comic book Ken doll.
Hi, ladies. Yeah, so that's not bad. So it does a virtual output too, so I could switch, between myself, and yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that was good. That's great. So there's a couple options there. Next question.
Boy, I got to get back to reality here. What are the panelists' thoughts on the utility called CleanMyMac? Asked Greg Swike in Irwin, Pennsylvania.
Go ahead, Jason.
In my humble opinion, the way to clean a Mac is to reinstall Mac OS. These kind of junky apps that are intended to kind of fix this stuff to me, not worth it.
I think what it does is it shows you, I think CleanMyMac specifically shows you duplicates as well as other, like stuff that if you've deleted an app and there's still some debris left in your operating system, it'll find those things.
There are apps that do that really well, but I don't think that CleanMyMac is one of them. It gets bundled with a lot of garbage.
Oh, right. Got it. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I use one called Tidy Up, and I've had it on my computer for a long time. And what it does is it goes through, indexes everything, and gives you lists of where you have duplicates, which can be really good if you're trying to, if you have backup hard drives and you're trying to make sure you only have 2 copies and you haven't double backed up things. It'll go through, tell you how many, and it's got all sorts of heuristics in there that says, give me 1 on each drive and throw out everything else of duplicate files.
Yeah. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama says, how can I transform a physical conference to a virtual concept with Zoom and allow panelists to see participants?
Go ahead, Rupert.
There's a few ways people go about this. It's going to depend a little bit on the size, what the numbers you're dealing with. And the tricky part is whether it's going to be acceptable or not for your attendees, your audience, to see each other. That's something you may not want to happen. If it's a public audience, you may need to police that, or you've got to keep an eye on what's happening because you don't want anything bad to kind of go wrong there. But you may be able to do it by basically having your audience in a meeting with focus mode enabled, because that will mean the host of that meeting will be able to see everybody's video, but they won't be able to see everybody. They won't be able to see each other's videos. Typically used in education, but it might work for this use case. And then keep them muted so they can't make a noise or talk to each other, but at least the host can see them, and then you can pipe that into maybe another meeting where you have your panelists, or if you already have a webinar, you could bring it in there as a participant, maybe as a way around it.
Yeah, I think that the question I have is are you in a physical space with your panelists? So if the panelists are able to if they're all in the same physical space or they're in a physical space, we very often will put all the whole virtual audience in meetings and just put them across screens. Stanford, Bob Smith showed this at some point. Stanford does that with a class that they have already. That's also being done in CS50 in Harvard. And then we've done it a lot where you put the folks on either a projection screen or on a large LED or on series of monitors, and they can look at them from there. I mean, that's even what I think Tony Robbins kind of started with, is kind of just doing something as simple as that. So they can interact with those, and you can pipe those panelists in. To Rupert's point, a lot of times when we want to bring a panelist in, we have a different breakout room that's tied into our system, so that when we want that panelist to talk one-to-one, we literally pull them out of the main system and bring them in as a single. And the reason we do that is so that we don't hear anybody else. Like, we don't have to worry about any of the other mixed mics. So we're not really opening their mic, a participant's mic on the far end. They raise their hand. We say, yeah, and then we move them to the other room. And it's seamless to everyone except for the person that gets moved, because suddenly everybody else disappears. But that's how we've managed it pretty often. A lot of times we queue them up. So we say, hey, we're going to bring you in a second. And we check them out a little bit and make sure everything's working. And then we pull them in. So there's a little bit of a step-by process there that makes that a little bit more stable as far as having that conversation with them. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Danny Law in Malaysia. Danny says, can you bring in Zoom ISO feeds into Keynote as a live video?
Yeah, we're about to test that. We think that we can, and we just haven't done it yet. So what we're gonna work on is getting 2 Mac Minis with what I'm trying not to do is destabilize our current Office Hours 2.0, but what we want to do is see if we can change the flow on 1 Mac Mini to put out 4 outputs into another Mac Mini. We think that we can get 4 outputs into the Mac Mini that way, and we think that possibly we could potentially get 8 into a Mac Mini to have access to those ISOs. So we think that a Sonnet box with a Blackmagic Duo card would get you 4 outputs that you could push out as SDI signals, and then you'd be able to push them either into another. The way to do that would be 4 out of one computer into 4 ins on the other computer. I'm sure that there's NDI options as well, but that's what we're looking at from the hardware perspective. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware, here on the panel. What would be a good choice for a headphone amp to drive my new Shure 215s?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I like the Angry Audio under console device, which is doesn't allow you to bump your knee on it. And I like the fact that I could wire it into my console and have the mix minus side tone on there also. Something a little more permanent that's mounted where I can get to it.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, here's something permanent, if you have lots of bucks, is the Macintosh MH200. And it'd make a nice set piece for the background, too. Huh?
There we go. I'll go ahead, Jason.
Wow, you made my answer look very inexpensive. So the resistance on those are going to be really efficient. The P3RA is a very inexpensive wireless ear monitor, and I adore it. It's running the 846s that I constantly am using on office hours, and sounds great.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was going to point out that that Macintosh, if you've ever gone into a store, those are green LEDs, not real tubes that are lit up. So if you want to bust the salesman,
they do use the tubes, but they're not the filament warmers.
Yeah. But it really messes them up when you say that's an LED there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
In my experience, things are getting easier in terms of playback into headphones. I use relatively inexpensive headphone amps with the current digital signals, and I get pretty good full range stuff. So even the little Behringer nano amps and things like that can do a good job. Headphones are very small drivers. They're very efficient, and they don't take a lot of power to drive them well. Now, if you're looking for coloration, it's a different story. But for just clarity, the inexpensive stuff works great.
What Leo and Andy got me hooked on MacBreak was the iFi hip DAC. It's a hip DAC, and it's it's $150 or something like that, and it does it's a really high end digital to audio, digital to analog converter with the headset, so it's USB-C in and a headphone out, and it's not too expensive, and it's cool, and you can put it in your backpack. Next question.
Next question from Nate Nicholson in Wake Forest, North Carolina. Other than vectorworks themselves, do any of the panelists have a suggestion for tutorials or classes to take to learn the program in more depth, specifically looking to learn on the three?
We're going to punch that one to the second hour.
Okay.
I'm just going to push that back to voting, and we'll go back. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, moving on to the next question. That comes from Mike Beardmore in Reading in the UK, and he says, have any panelists got advice? Whoops, that just disappeared too.
Well, you're missing one. You weren't at the top.
Okay, nothing's popping up here.
Tobias
Moss. Okay, yeah. Tobias Moss in Minneapolis says, what are your recommendations? There it is. Good. For an inexpensive fog machine. It'll be used for a photo shoot, video shoot with just one person as the subject.
I'll go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, so I can show the one that I have in my possession. I've had it for, 6 years now. It's done pretty well. $43, $45 isn't too bad. But yeah, so it's a Chauvet Light 700, what have you. The trick that I like to use with it is I will buy a cheap styrofoam cooler. I'll cut a hole and basically feed the fog machine into that cooler, put some dry ice in there, cut another hole on the other side. So basically the fog passes over the dry ice and it thickens it and allows it to be kind of more of like a cloud. So you can use it like as it is for atmosphere, right, to fill the room, or you can do a cloud look as well.
Yeah, I've had the Chauvet. I think it's the Hurricane 1301, which I think was a little bit more than $50. It was like a couple $100 or something like that. And it the biggest problem I had is that I flicked it on and it would fill the whole room. Like you can't see your hands in front of you in like a second. So that's the thing. The other thing to know is that, as Noah pointed out, dry ice, there's a difference between the oil-based and the dry, and there's CO2 and oil are the two different ones. And anything that's sensitive, you need to use CO2. It's not as effective, but it doesn't stick on everything. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's actually 3 different types of ways to go. You have fog machine, you have a haze machine, and then, of course, the dry ice option. Fog machine will just fog out the whole area. Haze will make it so if you have like laser lights or any other lighting coming through, it'll accent that. And then, of course, dry ice will drop to the floor. So if you're looking for like a cloud on the floor effect, you'll do that. Water over oil, once again, that'll get all oil will get over everything. Chauvet is a good one. I also use American DJ for a low cost fog machine.
Absolutely. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Brian Becker in Charlottesville, Virginia. He says, does anyone have any experience with either Scale Logic or the HP Zcentral remote boost systems for remote video editing? I'm looking for a remote video editing solution that is seamless as possible.
I think that what I would do there, I don't know if any of us have used these specifically, but to ask another question tomorrow or something like that, that really illustrates for us what kind of thing you're trying to edit, because we do a lot of editing remotely, and we do it in a lot of different ways. I think we would need to know your use case a little bit more clearly to define what we would recommend. Next question.
Next one comes from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. And Noah says, what's your favorite thing about large-scale productions? And how about small-scale productions?
Go ahead, Guy.
Don't you miss all these sweaty people? So I do miss getting to use big, huge lenses like this Digi66. And it's fun being able to reach out and touch somebody very far away. I mean, some of these are $250,000 for a lens that we rent. I miss seeing big, huge, trusses and things going up in the air. I miss that connection to the audience where, sometimes when you look up at the Jumbotron and you're like 30 feet big and you're looking through your little viewfinder that's like 1 inch, and you know that cable that's coming down your back is going to that feed. It's a pretty cool feeling. I miss crafty and good hotels, and I guess, that'd be all of them. I don't miss, I don't miss the bad hotels and the crappy food.
there's crafty, and then there's go ahead, Rupert.
So on like the big locations, I like the amount of resources you have available. I remember I had a problem with a portable air conditioner one time, and you snap your fingers, call a radio, and suddenly you've got like 2 refrigeration engineers right here fixing, working on the problem, and they need a part, and they go back to their machine shop, make a part, and come back and fix it. On smaller stuff, you have to wear a few more hats and improvise a little more, and that's kind of enjoyable too in its own way. But the resources available at large scale are very convenient.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
I've been a small cog in a large production. I like it because then I can do my little small cog thing and do what I need to do. As for small productions, which is what I do, I like the fact that I have that full challenge. Since I'm a one-person shop, usually being able to control everything and make it my production rather than have a team that could, one person could mess up something. It's all my fault if it messes up.
Go ahead, Courtney.
You can always tell the scale of the production by the quality of the caterer. Tony's caterer on big, A-list celebrity movie shoots. You have steak and lobster available every day at catering for lunch. It's amazing.
That's great. Go ahead, Sky.
I've just enjoyed this experience here because we've gone from small to big to small again. And when Guy Cochran shows up on your set, it's a big production. And it was just a real blessing to have people doing their job and not having to wear 12 hats, but only maybe 4 per person. And so that was the joy of, again, last week for me, being on a set with individuals managing their departments. And then we just check, and then move forward all together. It's both have their value.
Yeah, go ahead. Next question.
Often panelist Alex Skolner in London, UK, says, what features would you like to have added to Keynote in order of priority?
Sorry, go ahead, John.
Virtual cam driver support, USD-Z support, and then I would like some 3D primitive drawing tools inside Keynote as well.
Yeah, everything John just said is we're aligned. Go ahead, Courtney.
A Windows version.
Go ahead, Jason.
Illustrator import that isn't garbage.
Yes, we'll add that one. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. He says, what Android device was used in Alex's Instagram test other than one Sony phone and the yolobox? I haven't seen anything with HDMI input on Android.
We gave up on it years ago, so I don't know what the most current one is, but if you go to Alibaba and you search for Android box, you will see hundreds of options, and a couple of them will have an HD. I didn't look at it here. I mean, they all come and go, so and none of the ones that I had worked to the level that we thought that it would work. And so, but they were basically an Android operating system on a box, and it used HDMI in as a camera. or some of them used USB as a camera, but some of them had HDMI as a camera and HDMI as a output. But I don't remember what they were. They're about $60. But I would pay $500 for one that actually worked. So as I said, we went back to just shooting with the phone. I think I mentioned it in passing as something that we had gone through, but we never got the scaling right. It always screwed up the screen scaling. Next question.
Mike Beardmore, reading in the UK, says, have any of the panelists have advice prior to starting with AltSpaceVR?
I would have to. I don't know AltSpaceVR well enough, so we'll have to take a look at that. Yeah, I'm not sure. Go ahead, Courtney.
Stock up on Dramamine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that the big thing that is, I've talked about this before. I just think that our frontal lobe tells us that this should be a community and this should be an interaction. Our lower brain knows that it's not. And the delta between the two is measured by the level of depression. So the thing is that I think people get depressed when they think that they're getting something that their inner self knows isn't fulfilling them. I think it's part of what makes people crazy. And so I think that social media does that. I think that we're going to find that VR does that more. Like it's, there'll be, you'll have this sucking sound in your chest that it's just not fulfilling you at all, but you think it should. And that creates depression, so I think that until they get over the uncanny valley and this really feels like something, I think most of these spaces are going to have a hard time. There's people who really know games and they can, suppress that feeling for a while. But I think for the average person, I think it's going to be not a great experience for a while. I think there's a lot of people that are hyping it and excited about it, but CG characters, there's a low resolution thing that goes on that you're not really talking to people, and that's why I think what we do is compelling, because we're looking at video and we're seeing that person in full detail. Next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri says EpocCam Pro won't connect by USB. The device and the app software are up to date. I have iTunes open on my Windows machine. iTunes sees the iPhone, which I'm interpreting as no problem with the cable. Any ideas on what could be going wrong?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm just going to take a swing at this. I'm assuming you've got the EpocCam driver app installed on the computer also, because you will need that, and I just can't remember whether it is dependent on having iTunes installed and running, or whether actually that will conflict with it. So I'd certainly make sure your iTunes is up to date, but then I would try killing iTunes, like at a task manager level, make sure it's not even running, and then connect EpocCam. Open the app on the phone, make sure that USB tethering or USB mode is enabled in EpocCam in the phone. And then with iTunes closed and killed out, try connecting it then with the phone unlocked at that time, and see how that goes.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, similarly, there is a driver that's needed on that Windows machine. Oh man, I lost my train of thought, so keep going.
Next question.
James Hutchinson, Dublin, Ireland's up next. He says, as a viewer, does anyone else find the Office Hours 2.0 panel distracting? Is it still necessary in the daily show?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I can't speak for everybody, but I think that seeing some of these extra things in the gallery view, like the meters and the scopes and the whatevers, adds an element of theatre to the fact that there's a lot more going on, behind the scenes here than might otherwise meet the eye.
Yeah. Well, I need it, actually, to be honest with you. So because I'm not streaming it, it allows me to see what's going on with the system and making decisions about it. So it's just hard for me to go back and review it sometimes. And so I think that that's why it's there. You'll only have to worry about it for a couple more weeks, because in a couple of weeks, this will be the thing. So you won't have to watch this part of it. You'll only see that part of it. We're just trying to kind of nail down some of the last little bits and pieces of that process. So stay tuned for that. All right, we're going to change direction here and start going into our second hour. We have Nick Jushchyshyn here from Drexel University, and we're really excited to have. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so we don't know what we're doing with this hour yet. It's just that Nick is a huge resource, and he's always working on things and always in the front edge of stuff. And so my thought was we'd give Nick a little bit of time to talk at the very beginning of just some stuff he's thinking about, and show off a couple things that he might be interested in showing us. And then we'll move into answering questions about 3D and photogrammetry and visual effects. And Nick and I can probably tag team on some of those questions, and then. And we're hoping that we'll attract more people that are in the 3D realm. If you're doing 3D and you're interested in joining us in this kind of roundtable discussion around 3D visual effects, photogrammetry, AR, VR, this is a good time to join our panel. So, Nick, what do you got? What are you working on right now?
Too many things, but I guess I've kind of fallen into this Unreal Engine nexus, where this is a real-time 3D graphics engine that allows for a lot of flexibility in terms of the scenery that you can create, and the fact that it's happening live. And everything that I've done, I mean, Alex and I, as a background for folks, met in like early to mid 2000s at a time when the film industry was actually becoming the not film industry. It was becoming a digital industry just at that moment. And I was a computer programmer, had been doing software development, project management for like 10 years, wanted to break into film visual effects. And it actually worked out because, Alex had worked at ILM for some time and was starting online. Like there's this internet is going to be fast. I mean, I remember being in a talk that you gave saying, believe it or not, there'll be fiber optic to people's homes. So it hadn't happened yet, but it was that realization that the industry that had been very centralized was going to become decentralized rather rapidly. And so I was learning visual effects at that time. And the great thing about that transition was that the folks that had been in the industry for 10 years were just as new at digital effects as I was. And so I got to compete on an even footing. And I see that we're going through a similar transition in graphics and 3D effects right now, where these graphics engines that were originally developed to create video games. So Unreal Engine is owned by Epic, that's used to make Fortnite and a host of other video games. But the graphics, the capabilities of the hardware and the software are increasingly approaching absolute photorealism. It's not quite to the level that we're accustomed to from the feature film side of things. On feature films, we have all the time to wait for a day for a render.
Well, and I think that,
Alex,
I think it's a matter of time too, because if you go back to the 90s and animated feature films like Toy Story or something like that, the current real-time engines can do that in a heartbeat. And so that's the kind of thing you want to think about, is that where usually I find that real time is about 10 years behind, the visual effect. Like if you go back 10 years or, maybe 15 years, you're going to see real-time engines doing exactly what we were doing back then at that quality, or almost exactly, in real time. The one advantage that we had was that we also don't, when you look at a visual, we're not rendering most of those things. We render them in layers, so we're able to do a lot of things that are hard to do in a real-time engine, because we can render the foreground as a foreground. So it will never go into the background by accident. It will never, interact. We might add some effects to one layer and not to the other. Oftentimes, even with computer graphics, when you're watching a Shrek or something like that, I talked to a friend of mine that he was a roto artist on Shrek, and I was like, how are you a roto artist is someone who rotoscopes. They literally draw and do cleanup, and usually it's for compositing. And I was like, why would you have a roto artist on a fully animated film? And he goes, because it's cheaper to roto it than to re-render it. It's cheaper, faster to just sit there and paint out the problem. There's some like little polygon showing up or some little stray, whatever. We just go back and clean that up with a brush, rather than having them go 45 minutes a frame again, out. It's faster for us to do it. And so, so I think that I do agree with Nick that, Unreal and Unity and everything else is coming in fast, as far as, for filmmaking. And I think that we want to look at, even is it Oats Studio? That's is it that's the Bloomcamp. I think it's called. I want to call it Oats Studio, but it's anyway. But he's doing a lot of stuff in Unity or he has done a bunch of stuff in Unity that is pretty close to photoreal. It's definitely telling a story. It's telling a story that is believable and something that you would be part of. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Well, and the thing is that all of this really dovetails into, again, I'm an academic, I do research as well as teaching, and the area that I tend to focus on, having come out of the feature film effects world where billions of dollars are invested in the development of CG graphics, is then to take those results and apply them in other areas, in particular education. I mean, I think that 3D computer graphics in general are probably the highest efficiency, highest bandwidth means of transferring information from one human being to another, or particularly a group of human beings to a larger, broad group of human beings. So this is kind of like the next evolution of fireside chats, just sitting in around a fire and trying to explain a story about the hunt. So I tend to lean towards where can we use this to aid in communication, and where can we lean towards using this for education. Some really great examples in the last 5 years has been broadcasters such as the Weather Channel and Fox Sports with NASCAR and NFL, where they've integrated these real-time graphics in their broadcasts. And it's in part definitely adds a lot of, glitz and flair and, kind of visual effects to something that would have been traditionally just a live camera shot. This is what happens. And so, when you've got the Carolina Panther, jumping around the stadium that's larger than life, that's fun. But in an NFL game, they're adding informational graphics to the screen so that you can understand what's happening a little bit better. Fox has a great NASCAR show where they can take a 3D model of a NASCAR and explode it out and get down to individual nuts and bolts. And for me, not being an avid racing fan, someone who follows everything, it's fascinating to get a quick lesson in the mechanics of, why XYZ is in place in a car and how that's used and what a difference that makes. And it's a way of educating the audience, particularly if you've got, a group of folks that are maybe not as avid fans or something.
And we want to think about all of these things are merged together. When you think about like the first down line on a football game or the box, the strike zone in a baseball game, those are things that are added, that are quietly being added to everything that we're doing that gives the viewer more information, for better or for worse. And so I think that is it's really powerful that we can do those things to the current content. I also, really think about how it changes how we go to a historical location. Like right now, I've been doing a bunch of tests where we go to a place that's 1,000 years old, and I can show you while you're there with your phone, I can show you what it used to look like. Like I can track. So if we, if we model something, let's say we go to, we go to a castle in France, and that thing's all broken down and there's barely any of it left. Well, we have a pretty good idea what it used to look like. You talk to historians and you can build a brand new one, that looks perfect in AR. Now, when a person has a GPS, if you have a couple ultra wideband trackers in that area, or them in certain areas there, when you're walking through as a tourist, you could literally pick up your phone and it will figure out where the phone is using a handful of markers in the outside area. It can figure out exactly where your phone is down to the millimeter and exactly what it's pointed at. And then it can overlay the 3D of what it used to look like with what it looks like now. And you can literally fade back and forth. You can turn one off or turn the other off. You can put people in there, having them walking around. You could walk through a thing where there's little carts of people selling, deer, or whatever they were selling when they were there. So you can get a sense of everything there. Not only that, once I know you're there, I could literally have a tour that you could hear, now if you look to your right, you'll see this, and you look over to the right and you'll see this thing. You have little highlights appearing, around the castle telling you what those things were. That's all coming. Like that's why and if I wanted to just do that for my house, I could put that new castle and the old castle on my tabletop before I get there or never get there, and just research the whole thing exactly the same way. In fact, I could tour that castle and do all that visualization in my backyard if my backyard was big enough. So those are all things that I think are really fascinating about where we're going.
Yeah. And it's happening at a moment when we're really getting a convergence in terms of all of the different pipeline pieces that are needed to make that happen. So, we look over a decade ago, I worked on a film called Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And it was, hundreds of millions of dollars were spent to make this film where, the lead character for 1 hour was a computer generated head to look absolutely authentically real. And, today, there are tools that you can use for free that will give you a just about photoreal full body human being that you can fully manipulate. Again, motion capture technologies is another area that I've worked with over the last 15 years. And the systems to handle motion capture used to be extremely, the high end, the feature film, video game production systems are still very expensive. But there are low-cost points of entry that are, whether using a single video camera and a cloud-based AI, or very inexpensive, relatively speaking, a couple $1,000s to just wear basically a tracksuit with sensors in it, that allow folks to now very quickly create animation, that used to be highly, highly, highly specialized. Even creating 3D models was, again, always a highly specialized field. And now it's built into Apple's operating systems, iOS and Mac OS, that you've got photogrammetry libraries built in. So there's a plethora of inexpensive and or free photogrammetry tools for just using nothing more than photography to create a three-dimensional model. And of course, iOS devices now have lidar built into them, so you can get some pretty nice scans. I mean, they're not pristine, they're certainly not feature film grade, but you can start to get these 3D models created very inexpensively and by almost anyone. So there's that side of it on the creation side. And then, of course, there's now high bandwidth to homes, internet access, and expanding, Wi-Fi or wireless broadband. So the technology to deliver all of these digital assets is in place. And so everyone has handheld devices. Now you can use a handheld tablet or phone to start viewing these things and utilizing them. So really the infrastructure, the ecosystem is in place in a very inexpensive, democratized fashion. And so it's a really exciting time.
Yeah. And so, our goal on these once a month kind of discussions is to talk about what we're thinking about in 3D and kind of bounce that around a little bit and then switch over to your questions. Go ahead, Courtney, before we jump into the questions.
Yeah, I was going to point out another application that is Google Lens. It's been around as Google Goggles for many years. It works on any phone. Mm-hmm. And it does things like translates signs, anything you shoot with your phone, it'll translate into English and it'll put it the same color and it'll look like that sign is printed with English on it and it's really printed in another language. Or it identifies plants and buildings. You just point it at it and it tells you all about that plant or that building and floats a little sign above it and tells you exactly where you are, what it is.
Yeah, and that's been around for a long time, and that's the kind of stuff that we're going to see continue to expand, over time. Next question.
Our first question in this section from Nick from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, and says, "How are low-price trackers like Intel's Realsense and HTC Vive good enough for a live stream multi-camera broadcast with Unreal Engine?" Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so it goes to that democratization. The base answer is yes. The qualified answer is, well, it depends on exactly what you plan to do in terms of the motion of those cameras and the setting that you're in terms of lighting and such. But there is a library, I believe, that is available for the Intel Realsense camera. That is also aided if you use kind of April tag, kind of these black and white square. They look like QR codes, but they're a little bit different that are basically able to use the camera system to calibrate and be able to tighten up the tracking. So both of these are fast enough for general slow camera moves. Another thing you can do to really leverage them is just avoid any kind of direct contact between your live action talent and the actual CG floor, for example. So there's subtle synchronization drifting that sometimes happens with these lower cost solutions, maybe some subtle accuracy. But if you're not showing direct contact, if you're doing like a medium shot, or you're doing kind of a, medium wide type of shot where you're not seeing the talent's feet touching the ground and all the background is your CG and there's a little bit of distance, those solutions are perfectly fine. And so you could do some really effective kinds of virtual production things that way.
Yeah, one of the things that we did a bunch of stuff with Medium before it was sold to, I think, Adobe now, but it used to be an Oculus thing. And so what we did is we literally took an Oculus controller and attached it to our camera and calibrated the camera to do it. And we would do handheld shots with it. You could do that with HTC as well, and it would track that in. And would I use it on a big broadcast? Maybe not, but as a cool thing that you can jump into the virtual world and have a handheld camera operator and have them doing something, knowing that it might pop every once in a while a little bit. People will give you a lot of room for error when you're doing something really cool. And that is one of the reasons that we're talking about this on Wednesdays, and one of the reasons that I highly recommend being part of this conversation, thinking about it, playing with it, is you get a lot of room to make mistakes when it's not working for anyone. Like that's when, COVID gave us a lot of opportunities to experiment in virtual events that, we just didn't have before. When I was doing Hangouts, Google paid us a lot of money to do lots of crazy jobs, and none of them looked great. And sometimes they didn't. They kind of, had all kinds of little issues because of it was Hangouts. We were doing something 10 years ago that we still just getting good at doing now. But we learned a lot about production, and we were able to do things that almost nobody else could do because we were given the open license to do it, because it was brand new and it was hard. So that's why, you want to get into these things when it's hard, not when it's something that everyone expects it to be produced at a high level. So yeah, what were you saying, Nick?
Incidentally, one specific note about the Vive is that the default setup is to use 2 of the tower stations that are the laser transmitters that are used by the trackers. Get at least 4 of those. And as you add those, they can add accuracy to those trackers, and you get less popping and jumping.
And the thing to know is that with Vive and with the Oculus, you are dealing with a much smaller space. So those of us who use motion capture and other things are using 30 by 30 spaces or 40 by 40 spaces. You're really talking about a 10 by 10 space is really where you're limited to. I think for most of those to do well. As you get any further, they're not really built. You're getting out of the spec that they were designed for. Next question.
Comes to us from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California. He says, what would be some of the best stock footage types to sites for 3D objects?
I think you're one off there.
Am I?
Yeah. Here, I'm going to hit cancel.
There's a carryover from the first hour, I think.
Yeah, there was one above that. And yeah, from first hour that we moved over to this one. Yeah, that one there. Do you see it?
Yes, I do. Nate Nicholson in Wake Forest, other than vectorworks themselves, do any of the panelists have a suggestion for tutorials or classes to take to learn the program in more depth, specifically looking to learn more on the 3D and previs side of event design? I'm trying to think. There's for Vectorworks, I think there's a lot of stuff on YouTube that people are showing, but I don't have a specific one. I think they have a lot of their own training there. I would also look at, I know that Udemy and LinkedIn, I believe both have courses on Vectorworks. You'll find that the LinkedIn are a little bit more organized, but there's more of them in Udemy. so those are the things to look at as well. As far as there's a lot of good resources for 3D, whether it's Blender or Vectorworks or Cinema, on both of those platforms that are reasonably good to kind of work through. Next question. Next one comes to me from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles. What would be some of the best stock footage type sites for 3D objects?
Nick?
Yeah. So if you're working with real-time engines, either Unity or Unreal Engine, each of those has their own marketplace, kind of like the app, Apple App Store, and they're both curated, and so they're also integrated with the engines. So if I use Unreal Engine for the most part, and so going on the marketplace, there is huge library of, we call them assets. I think you call it 3D objects, but there could also be animations and music and visual effects and things like that. So if you're working outside of an engine, then there are also quite a few generic places. Sketchfab is one. TurboSquid is another common one. So those are the ones that come to mind immediately that are most common. There may be a few others out there, but yeah, Sketchfab and TurboSquid are the more generic sites that come up quite a bit. But the marketplaces for the engines, if you're going to work with Unity or Unreal Engine, those places are gold. And I know that at least on the Unreal Engine side, there's loads of free, super high quality models and assets in that marketplace. I would expect the same on the Unity side as well.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Hey, Nick, or maybe Alex, have you guys heard anything about Apple coming out with their own 3D store? I'm seeing that in the news lately.
I haven't seen that. I wouldn't be surprised that they would build a platform to buy and sell USDZ objects. I think that what's going to be interesting is what happens when USDZ. I know that I keep on talking about it and everyone thinks I'm crazy, but when USDZ hits hits Keynote and hits Pages, I get that not everyone uses Keynote, but it's 1,000 times larger than the current. It's still a small market, but it's 1,000 times bigger current 3D market. And I think that is going to be a really interesting thing, and I think that's going to be, that's the, so that's the part that I think is interesting is how big the market's going to get. I wouldn't be surprised if I was Apple. I would definitely do that. I wouldn't leave it to an outside market to do that. I would build my own market, my own app store, so to speak, for 3D objects. I do think that the hard part that TurboSquid will have and all these other companies is that the price of the models on the Apple version will be 1/10 of what they were being sold for before. So Apple, and I wouldn't be surprised if Apple doesn't put downward pressure on it because they want everybody to use the models. So I think you're going to see models for $1, $2, $3 each, that are out there. And if people don't put them in for that price, Apple will. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if Apple doesn't prime the pump to set the pace of here's thousands of objects at $3 each or $2 each, where they can afford to do that. That makes that a new market. Now, I still think you can make millions selling them at $3 each because the market is so much bigger than what it was before. And so I do think that's probably right around the corner. But I haven't heard anything about the 3D market, but I do think that would make a lot of sense because they're going to drive a huge amount of demand. So there's no reason for them not to extract revenue from it. The other one is Kitbash 3D. Have you played with Kitbash, Nick?
Yeah. So Kitbash is a private company, though. They, Sketchfab and TurboSquid take submissions from artists anywhere. So they're kind of like an aggregate location, but Kitbash it's like they have their own artists and producing their content. But it's a great name, of course, that, for anyone who happens to know that all those little bits of detail on the, ILM spaceship models for, the pre-digital age models, they would take, an actual hobby shop model of a car and just take all the engine parts and put them all over the spaceships. And that was called kit bashing. You were taking a model kit and you were bashing it apart for use.
And it goes a long way. The kit bashing goes a long way. If you look at the back of Sebulba's pod in episode 1, and then look at the front of an A10 Warthog, just look at the two of those. Just look back and forth and back and forth.
Oh yeah,
and
like this.
One's a machine gun, the other one's an exhaust pipe.
Yeah, I think for Rogue One, John had a little kind of rogue project of his own to just literally 3D model all the different pieces of like automotive hobby shops, like all the original they're also called greebles when you start putting these things on the models. And they actually started just hand modeling all those different parts so that when they created the digital models, they would
just
still
throw
be
them all in.
authentic to that universe. Yeah.
Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles comes up next with this one. When putting together a portable green screen Unreal Engine set that needs to travel to a different location weekly, what are some of the things to consider?
Wrinkles. No, wrinkles and lighting. So getting good, solid lighting. So large sources on a green screen makes a big difference. And then having a green screen that you can get rid of the wrinkles or any kind of imperfections. I am going to say this over and over again. The only green screens that I use are composite components. So Jonathan Erland figured this out a long time ago. They're Lycra. I don't see any other green screens that are Lycra that are the right green. So Roscoe green is too blue, in my opinion. So composite components, I've been using them for 25 years at this point. They are Lycra. You can get them long. The biggest ones you can get without a seam at all, I think, is like a 9x9. And then after that, you're going to start getting you're going to start getting seams down every 9 feet or something like that, because I think that's the width of their roll. So anyway, so I've had ones that are like 12x30 that you can, and then you stretch them. And the big thing is you can buy like a cheap frame. I have a couple of these. These are like the whatever it is, the cowboy camera, whatever the thing is on Amazon. You can buy those cheap frames for $20, $30. They all pack up into a little case. You can check those with the you can pull it up, and then it uses the little like rope versions of like with a little garter belt. It's a little string with a little bit of the garter belt attachment to it, and you hook them to the green screen and you stretch them onto those frames, and I have at some point I'll show you up. I have a very special knot that is really, I learned it on the farm. I don't know what it's called. I just know how to do it. So I will, I'll show that at some point. Anyway, but that's how I put it, because what it does is you wrap it up, it'll hold it really tight, but if you pull up on it, it'll just undo. So when you're breaking it down, it's really fast. So anyway, you stretch it out. If you have a spray bottle, you spray it 2 or 3 hours ahead of time. When you come back to it, it'll be perfectly flat without any wrinkles, the right color. And then all you need, I still use like 4x4 Keynotes on either side. I flag them off so they don't get to the person, and then I'm able to make that work. And so those are that's what I would highly recommend thinking about. It's constant. The real thing that you want to wrestle with is getting great lighting. Keying is not hard. It's easy. It's the lighting and the shooting that's hard. Like if you get that right, if you get the keying right, you're gonna have a much easier time making that work. For some reason I was going to try to show you something here, but I can't get photos to show up. Anyway, let's go to the next question.
Yeah, I was actually.
Go ahead. Nick.
I was just going to share.
Do you have access to the back end? I don't know if you're not in.
I do. Can't. Oh, I should have.
Then I know that you want to talk.
I thought I was just default.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be
ahead,
sure
Nick.
to do that.
Go ahead, Nick.
So the immediately there's all kinds of it depends answers to that, because is new location each and every week having to do, like, are you going to fly? Are you going to need to check your bags, or is that something in a vehicle? And how big is the vehicle? How much storage space do you have? How much time before and after the shoot takes place are you going to have for setup and breakdown? And then of course, just the logistics of what kind of shots do you want to get? Are you going to be doing, head and shoulders? Are you going to need to go all the way down to the floor? Are you going to shoot with floor contact? So all of those things definitely need to be considered. I will absolutely, of course, agree with Alex's discussion on the choice of green screen. Those Lycra green screens, I've been to a few shoots with Alex with those, and they're just glorious. They're wonderful.
Here,
yeah, go ahead. You have.
I was going to show. This is the 12x30 kind of put into a system here. So this is it stretched over. Now we built this kind of skeleton. So we bent speed rail, and then built some bases for it, and stretched it, over top of this. Now what we did here this is a part for the Unreal part. This was actually not an Unreal. This was in a game, but that little cube we used to calculate the distortion of the camera so that we knew that our camera position and our focal length was correct. And so when we there was a cube that was built in the game for us that had that cube exactly the same size in the game to scale. So if our camera cube and the cube in the real world and the cube in the virtual world matched, we were able to match this up. And this is done like 6 or 7 years ago, so there's better ways to do it now, but that's why that cube's there. Everyone always asks, what's the cube for? Anyway, that's the green screen, not fully lit, and that's my nephew playing. And we actually installed this at E3 to do a thing where people could be in VR and be playing and do that thing. So anyway. Next question.
I mean, that temporary
go ahead,
screen that you threw up there looks better than most installed screens.
Right.
You know, so
right. But it's because we know that it's a big deal, and we paid a lot of attention to it, and the secret is making that screen nice and smooth and clean. Everything gets easy after that. It's that people just go, well, we have a good keyer, but the problem is that every time you have a bad lighting and everything else, you're cutting into the hair. You're cutting off, soft edges. Motion blur becomes something that doesn't look good. So when you pay attention to all those little details and really push the outer edge of how you light your screens, you're going to get a lot more quality out of it. And there's just some places you just can't get it back. So I got Courtney.
Yeah, I had a question on a portable setup like that. If you're going to have to track camera movement, I hope you can hear me above the.
We can.
If you're going to track camera movement, do you have to have pickups on the lens to track?
It's on the camera. So and Nick might be able to talk to this more, but a lot of these look up. So they're either using active trackers that are electronic. So the camera, like Mosys, I believe, has a tracker that you put on the camera, and then you have transmitters around that you put around. So that tracker, once you calibrate it to your camera, it knows where that camera is based on the other transmitters that are in the space. So it's not using any visuals to do the tracking. Most of the ones that are doing this real time you can't put trackers in the system. So what it does is you put trackers. Some of the early ones were all, have patterns on, even the ILM's early ones were patterns on the ceiling, and it's tracking those patterns to make that work. Did you want to add anything to that, Nick?
Yeah, sure. So Mosys and Stipe are often used in the format that Alex is talking about, where basically a small infrared camera is placed on the shot camera. It's pointed up at the ceiling, and then lots of little reflective dot stickers are just spaced out all over the place in the ceiling. And so the camera that's doing the tracking has a ring of infrared LEDs that send out infrared light that hits the reflectors, comes back into the camera, and then the software tied to that uses that unique pattern. You're not supposed to precisely place those stickers. You're just supposed to place them randomly so that you get this kind of random pattern that the system calibrates and tracks on. So that's one format. With Vive trackers, you've got a set of the towers. There's little boxes that are transmitting lasers, and they're transmitting in a sweep pattern, and the tracker it has infrared sensors on it, and so it's picking up as the lasers from each of the towers sweep across the room. The tracker is picking up when the lasers hit it across its own surface, and then it uses that data to decide, oh, I know where I am now, and here's my 3D coordinate. Mocap systems like OptiTrack and Vicon have lots of cameras, kind of like a GPS system. They're shooting light into the space, and then you'll have either reflective or transmitter markers. So this, for like Mandalorian camera tracking, they'll have motion capture cameras around the stage and a small set of either reflectors or infrared transmitters on the camera itself, and that the cameras are picking up.
Well, that tracks camera position. Do you have to pull data out of the lens to know focal length and zoom?
Yeah.
Yes. So that it sets the depth of field correctly for aperture, focal length.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. There's a tool set that's basically called lens encoders. Usually the most common format is a small rectangular, well, oddly, just about the size of a little bit larger than a Teensy, a Raspberry Pi Teensy. And they'll have a rotary encoder on them, and so that those rotary encoders will have a gear mesh that fits right into your lens rings that would normally be used by a focus puller or a motorized focus puller to adjust the lens, but these will then rotate with those lens rings and encode that into a value. And so again, there's a bit of a calibration process. So if you have a lens, let's say it's got 3 rings, it's got a aperture ring, it's got a focus ring, and it's got potentially a zoom ring, you'll need 3 encoders on that lens. And then Unreal Engine can, or whatever tool you're using, usually has a tool to basically take that data. You can calibrate it, say, okay, here it is, I'm at f12, here I am at f22, and in between a couple times, that calibrates the range of rotation on the encoder to what the actual physical lens values are. And then there's also an optical process where, like the cube that Alex was showing in his photo, is filmed at one particular set of settings. And okay, now the computer understands how much lens distortion there is at this focus, at this zoom depth, and all of that information then is stored in the computer in a database. And then as the camera operator either adjusts focus or aperture or zoom, all of those settings are updated in the graphics engine to match.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Joshua Minden in Madison, Wisconsin. He says, how would you suggest someone get back into 3D, program learning, and so forth, after over a couple of decades away? I spent a couple of years, he says, with Softimage XSI back in 2001.
Congratulations. Softimage was great. XSI was such a great app. So, I mean, you have to decide what you're trying to do. So what I would say is that the app that is the most useful, that you get the most done for the least amount of time but costs money, is Cinema 4D. It is the broadcast standard. So when almost all the broadcast graphics that you see are generated in Cinema at this point. Now it doesn't do film production. I mean, they do film production with it, but not a lot. It's mostly a matte painting kind of thing. They don't do. I mean, it has great character tools. It has a lot of texturing tools. It's just that that's not where it's used as much in the industry. It is, and admittedly, I've used it for 20 years or whatever. So on and off. I'd like that number sounds great, but I'm not very good at it. But I can hack my way through it. Obviously Maya is another great core app that will do a lot of things, but you just have to be much more technical. Like it's not I want to just throw things together and render them out. And I would say that Houdini is, if you really want to get into I want to do something really heavy, have a specialized talent, that everybody needs. Houdini is a good one there. And of course, Blender is free and becoming more powerful with every release. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, and in addition to Blender, of course, Unreal Engine and Unity. On a practical side, I usually always recommend that folks just pick a project.
Yeah.
I really didn't dive into Unreal Engine myself really particularly deeply until I wanted to build myself, a virtual set from which I could teach from during COVID. So that's kind of really where the snowball started to build for me, besides telling students to go ahead and use it. If you're already familiar with programming, any of these tools tend to use Python as its primary scripting language. So, you could even start with just messing around with Python a little bit. There's always a need for folks that know programming and know 3D. And, again, you don't have to invest a whole lot of money to get started. I mean, really, Blender is free and is increasingly powerful and gets used in different, independent studios. Freelancers use it all the time. And everything that you would learn by using Blender is directly applicable in studio applications that cost thousands of dollars, Cinema 4D, Maya, Houdini, all of the core principles of what's involved in creating a 3D model, and how do you put a texture on it, and how do you use the texture to create a material and light interaction. All of that is generically applied in all the different programs, just different user interfaces. And
if you decide that there's something you specifically want to do, jump on to either after hours, but really office hours on Wednesdays, and tell us what you're trying to do. Say, I'm trying to do, because every one of these, whether it's SketchUp or what we talked about earlier, Vectorworks or Rhino or all these other, there's lots of 3D apps. that all have their own use. so it's, you want to think of it as a toolbox, not a group of hammers. So they're all, this one's a hammer, this one's a screwdriver, this one, and a lot of us, especially Nick and I and other folks that I think will jump on with us over time, know a lot of these different apps. So we can give you a lot of nuances of, if you're trying to do that, this app is the best, or this app is the, like this one might be the best one there to do. So definitely feel free to jump into a project, as Nick said, and then come up on Wednesdays and ask us questions. Next question.
Next one comes from our own Sky Gleason here in the panel from Seattle. Nick, what is Drexel, and why is it supporting this concept you're teaching?
Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, okay. So, Drexel is a major research university. We're based in Philadelphia. And so I teach in the Westfall College of Media, Art, and Design. So we're focused on, media, art, and design. So the department I'm in is the digital media department, and we predominantly focus on computer graphics. So there's a program in computer interactivity that really focuses on tablet and handheld graphics, web-based graphics, and interaction, user interfaces, that sort of thing. It's user experience design, I think, they've just renamed their program. We also have traditional animation visual effects, digital animation visual effects, and of course game design. And then there's the program that I run, which it's currently named VR and Immersive Media. We're actually going through the process, and hopefully it's not official yet, but we're likely renaming that to Digital Media and Virtual Production, because it's just becoming a broader and broader space, and just having it lead off with the word VR actually is just a narrow slice of everything that we cover. So my whole role there is to be in tune with what is coming next, what is being used today, what's the trajectory, where is it going, and how do I prepare our students for the future that they will graduate into. We have our undergraduate programs are 4 or 5 years long, depending on how many 6-month industry co-op cycles the students choose to go on. And as a result, they enter as freshmen out of high school, and they're going to enter into the industry world in half a decade later. And so that's how far ahead we need to be, because they're going to graduate in half a decade, and we need to prepare them for the world that's going to exist then, not for the one that necessarily exists right now. And so that's my job, is to stay on top of and ahead of these things. And so that's where all of that fits together.
Next question.
Alex 4D Goldner, our friend in London in the UK, says, will there be more mainstream cross-platform game engines that will be used for media production? Can media production support more in terms of different training needed, staff certification, and recruitment?
Go ahead, Nick.
The game engines are cross-platform. So the game engines, there are two major ones being Unity and Unreal Engine. Unreal has some limitations on the Mac. In particular, the Unreal Engine on the Mac doesn't really support live video. So the NDI plugin tools and the Blackmagic plugins, all the things that allow me to do live video in Unreal Engine on my PC, those are not active on the Mac side, but everything else Unreal Engine does is available and works on a Mac. In fact, you can use Unreal Engine to create iOS applications and augmented reality tools and things like that. So Unity, likewise, of course, is completely cross-platform. At the moment, in terms of media production, Unreal Engine is a bit ahead, a few steps ahead of Unity at this moment. Unreal Engine recognized this as a space to step into a bit earlier, I believe. They actually retooled the way it calculates time, because it was the first of these two to support the 2997 broadcast frame rates. And so that helped it get a real good foothold into broadcast graphics. And so most of what you see today, you might hear of zero density being used, or pixotope, or Xsymmetry. The 3D graphics features of these tools are actually retooled versions of Unreal Engine. So I believe both Unity and Unreal Engine, you're the source code is actually available for free download off of GitHub. And so you can make your own derivative tools. And so a lot of these broadcast tools for 3D graphics are actually derivatives of the source code of Unreal Engine. So
and that's licensing. It's a funny thing because they're almost free for the folks that are building them, because Unreal doesn't, until you get, I think it's $1 million
in revenue.
Yeah. So you can get started on a lot of these things and build these things out, and a lot of production pipelines never generate any revenue, from selling on something with Unreal. So that it's just kind of a free place for them to play. And I think that Unity made a conscious decision of, this is a lot of resources to commit to 2997, and I don't think they believed that was the future. Like, the future for them was that they were going to go into AR, they were going to go into a completely CG world, and they weren't going to try to interact with broadcast. So Unreal has taken that broadcast area. It doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, I think that Unity has a different set of tools that it's there, and we'll see with the we will see what happens, with the purchase of Weta Digital, the Unreal again was, I think that Epic made kind of an unforced error in this whole battle with Apple, because, I will expect to see in the next couple keynotes, especially with the purchase of Unity, the connection that Apple already had with Weta, that Apple will promote Unity a lot. And that really muddies the water for a lot of us that thought that it was kind of over. Like, we thought that this was going to be all going to be Unreal. We always assumed it was going to be Unreal, and now we're not assuming that anymore. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Nick. You were going to say something, Nick?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because there's a tail end of this question about, in terms of different training needed, staff certifications and recruitment. I mean, I think that is coming. One of the things that I am involved in is SMPTE, for example, which is heavily involved in establishing guidelines and standards in motion picture and television production, is really looking at this space very closely and developing educational materials. Of course, more and more schools and universities are getting involved in it. Again, our program started in 2018, so we've been at it for a while at Drexel, but more and more programs are starting to get involved in it. The nice thing is that the software is free, so there's really no cost of entry to start using the software itself. But the hardware, for high-end production is still rather costly. I mean, we have a virtual production wall, and we've leveraged projection technology for that, because it's a fraction of the cost and far more flexible than the LED walls used in Mandalorian style productions. So.
And as a note, we're going to speed up our answers a little bit because we have a little bit less time, and so we'll start going a little bit faster. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Sky Gleason in Seattle. The Office Hours Space Project has been offered a platform for a virtual set for the remote host and remote on-camera guests. What ideas would you have about using the virtual set for this March 19th live event?
Go ahead, John.
So I sent Nick an email on this. The rocket's got 2 flight computers on it. One of it's got telemetry sent down to the ground, and then we take that stream, and then we're feeding that into Tuomo's package. But I was hoping for a 3D rendering of the rocket going up, hitting the apogee, and the parachutes coming out and all that stuff. The guys are telling me that we're running out of time to do that, so I guess it's a lot more work than it appears in real life.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, obviously it's going to depend on the complexity of the 3D models that would need to be created, and you have to think about the staging of all of that. I think that Alex would certainly attest to, you want to stick to, when you're doing a big event, you want to stick to what you're sure of and that you're going to nail it. And then if you're going to have repeat events, then you kind of add and enhance going forward. You would have to get those data feeds into your 3D graphics engine in order for that to be, truly authentic and working and reliable, and know that it's going to work at distance and all of those sorts of things. But certainly you could do those types of things, create the 3D graphics for that. You could also use, an augmented reality approach where the 3D graphics are simply composited into the broadcast, like you see with a lot of election coverage where the maps appear in front of the talent and things like that. So there's a lot of options, but given that you're less than 2 months away, I would say put a lock on the technology that you're using and just make sure it is bulletproof before the live event.
I would recommend that anyone's interested play with it, because I think that obviously what John can produce is the real-time telemetry as a feed, and we should try to plug it in, even if it's a cube with a flat plane of a background. I would test it, or I would take a 3D model of a Estes rocket or something and just stick it in there, and then show it in the space and have a camera connected to it and everything else to see if we can get the data coming in real time. I would do that just as don't worry about it. We're not gonna use it in the show, but a lot of times, what you'll see in productions when we're doing productions over and over again is there's another side production going on where we're testing new technologies, where we just go, oh, we're just gonna, you're seeing it here. Oh, Office Hours 2.0 is getting built out, and you're seeing us run it in parallel all the time for months as we figure out how to make it actually work.
Anyway. I mean, if we're brainstorming on this, it would be great to do like a live stream of the data, right? So an internet things of this is where it is right now. And then someone could have local apps that are streaming in that data and doing a high fidelity render on their own desktop or on their device in response to that data stream.
Right. No, I said we were going to go faster, and then we went slower. So we'll go to the next question. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. Could you see Unity being used for broadcast virtual production work on the Mac?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that's coming. You can already do a lot of the things you need to do.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem for broadcast when you say that is 2997, and that's something you'll have to run it through a frame converter from 30p to 2997 to, you can't just put it out raw, which will be a little bit of latency, which has its own issues with that process. So that's the only challenge with Unity when it relates to broadcast. Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada, discuss the merits and differences between Unreal, Unity, and other competitors in the market.
Go ahead, Nick.
So Unreal is definitely established in the media virtual production space in general. So those skills are readily transferable to multiple studios and multiple productions. The Unity tool has been around forever as well, and is actually tends to be more favored in VR side of things. So those are the main things. Unity is constructed more from, you come from a computer programming background and want to get into 3D graphics, whereas Unreal Engine seems to be structured more of, you're familiar with art and graphics and scene design and want to get into programming something real time.
Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle is up next. He says, what's the processing of using tracking, the process of using tracking with Panasonic's BGH1 in Unreal, and is there a better camera bang for the buck?
Currently, bang for the buck, I'm thrilled with the BGH1 from Panasonic. I used to be mostly almost all Blackmagic, but this Panasonic BGH1 has a dedicated Genlock input, dedicated time code input, also output. So it touches on all the right things. So it's got a great form factor, a little bit bigger than like the micro studio cameras, but better light sensitivity. So right now for its price point, I'm really happy with the BGH1. In terms of tracking, there's lots of choices. You could put a Vive tracker on it. You could put an Intel Realsense camera on it. You could put a bunch of reflectors, and we use our Vicon tracking system with a tracking crown on it.
Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California. Can we use LiDAR scanners to create a virtual tour in real time with the freedom to walk around and have multiple perspectives instead of a single camera's perspective? Maybe in the future?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, totally possible right now. I'm in the process of 3D scanning, LiDAR scanning with an iPad, a multi-acre botanical garden, indoor, outdoor, working with a team of students to create 3D models from those LiDAR scans and bring that whole thing into Unreal Engine. I don't have permission to show that yet, but it's extremely effective. And again, we can create from that one set of models in Unreal Engine, complete with vegetation. We could create virtual reality for headsets. We can create applications that use, video game controls. It could be shared on the web. You can actually make product configurators. There's a template for like if you were shopping for a car, like what color car and what kind of seats and all that, you could scroll through different features of the garden and different vegetation and swap it around yourself. So there's a lot that can be done with that. And you could start with, the lidar that's built into your iOS device or photogrammetry.
Yeah, this is not lidar. This is just photogrammetry. So this is from Angkor Wat, Cambodia. And if I can get my mouse over there. These are all 3D models. That's actually a 3D model you could walk up to if you wanted to. Here's some other pieces here. So those are all the photos I took in that area. There's the photos kind of around it. Those are that's the point cloud that I worked on. And the biggest problem you get into with some of this is, so that's all 3D models. The challenge you get into is geometry, how heavy the geometry is. So that right there is about 330 million polygons, and my iPhone can only support about 2. So you have to basically start working with level of detail and figuring out what you turn on and turn off, or what's high res and low res. But that's an enormous amount of, that's all. But what you're seeing there is all 3D. So if the camera could support it or hold it, I could walk through that in real time and look around and have things hopping. I could even put people into it and everything else. And that's what's coming with more processing power. But that's only using photos. Now, when you combine lidar with that, you end up with something else, because the lidar structural will give me better scale. It'll error correct some of those little bits and pieces. And reality capture does a pretty good job of making those things work. Go ahead, Nick, and then Noah. And we're going to run out of time, so we're going to do one more question after this, and then we're going to have to. There's a lot of questions, so we'll have to. We're going to send them back to you.
I was just going to mention that the next version of Unreal Engine 5 has a technology they call Nanite that's specifically designed to handle these multi-million polygon models and process them more efficiently on GPUs and leverage that. And that's part of their strategy, where they recently acquired Capturing Reality. So they have their own photogrammetry tool built in. So that's definitely the direction things are going in general.
Go ahead, Noah.
I was just thinking of mapping a room with multiple LiDAR sensors at the same time in real time, so that you can see a concert or see whatever, and then move yourself within that space as that's happening,
In real time.
That's a future thing.
Yeah, future thing is real. Yeah, the real time capture of it. You can use flash lidar like they use on cars. The accuracy of it is much lower, and that's the real challenge there. Let's go to the next question. We're going to kind of do a very fast round. Go ahead. Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada. Speaking of augmented reality and overlaying information on reality, how long will it be until people who are not 3D experts will be able to build experiences? What will it take to get there?
Apple. Apple's going to do it, and we're going to do it in the next 2 years. Like, it's going to be over the next 2 years. You're already seeing, it's not quite there where anybody could do it, but it is coming fast. You look at a lot of the updates for Motion and Final Cut. They are in the 3D realm. Apple's building interactive tools right now, right under our nose, and those engines have already been installed. So I think that you're going to find that in the next 2 years, Apple will make it possible. Go ahead, Nick.
No, you just beat me to it. So,
no, but that's where this is going to explode. We're all in a early this is really cool, but still a little geeky, and that's where you want to be in the beginning. You want to get into it now, not when it's easy. Next question.
Chris Fritchie in Tomball, Texas says, what's the material that Alex showed off for his temp green screen, and where did he get it?
compositecomponents.com. It's a digital green screen. It's Lycra. You can get all different ones, and I think they actually updated their website after 20 years, and so you can actually see what's going on there and order it. It's the best. Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada. How will developments in 3D graphics impact live sports and esports content?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that right now. I think that the big deal is that because the software is free, you'll start seeing more and more lower budget broadcasters pick it up. So more and more Twitch streamers are going to start doing it. I know of one in particular who has a very similar name to mine. And that you'll just start seeing more and more engaging graphics and data being integrated into those broadcasts.
The gaming... Esports is like 1% of where it could be because they're still stuck in gaming. But when esports turn into esports and really build things that are not trying to replicate basketball or football, but also not geeky games, and they find their own space, it'll be 100 times bigger. And I think that's probably going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. Go ahead.
What I was going to share that's interesting is like there are games like Rocket League, for example, as a game. There is a plugin for that will actually take data feeds out of the game. So all the player names, the team names, who scored, what speed they were at, what energy their cars have, all that data is being streamed out of the game. And so a streamer can integrate that with 3D graphics using Unreal Engine and incorporate that into their streams. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Andrew Moyer, Oakville, California is next, and he says, green versus blue screen, why? For the upcoming Slumberland Netflix film, shooting in a pool, the building next to my theater used blue all around, but other locations used green. And he's got a link there.
Yeah, the biggest reason that you use one or the other, the problem is water tends to absorb the light, and so you end up with a hard green screen underwater is harder to key because the spill is weird. So usually you almost always use green, because green in a digital sensor, green is better represented at 60% of the data coming out of the camera is green. So you're going to have more data, to work with in that sense. So you don't use blue because blue is grainy. The blue record is where all the junk gets thrown. And so green is, blue is usually not the best thing for keying, except when underwater and when there's a heavy green or it's dark. So blue spill tends to not look as problematic as green spill. And so to despill, to pull that spill back out again. And so, especially if you're underwater, the green spill will look like algae, like it'll look weird. Whereas blue spill will just kind of fade into what they're already doing. So that's usually it's those kinds of things that get you to blue, but you'll use green most of the time because digital cameras handle it better. But there are reasons to use blue in dark areas, underwater, when there's heavy green assets. Next question.
Arthur Krekus in Toronto says, what would you recommend to get started in Unreal Engine if one wants to use it for virtual sets and live events? I see a lot of people using Aximmetry with Unreal. Is that necessary?
Go ahead, Nick.
So Aximmetry is not necessary. It just provides a lot of traditional broadcast graphics functionality out of the box, but you do not need it. You can, everything I'm doing here with this whole environment, and I'm sitting here at this desk, this is all just native Unreal Engine, nothing special really. I have a YouTube channel, Pixel Prof, and there's a how to get started playlist in there. It starts with downloading Unreal Engine, and there's a virtual studio free learning level that has all the pieces that you need, and you can step by step learn how to do the basics of creating a studio set. And then online, Unreal Engine has an online learning resource of its own, which is extremely extensive and really in depth and very, very clear. So we definitely browse through that under virtual production and start picking up skills, and then come to office hours and ask questions.
Yeah, and we did some stuff with Nick last year. I think that we hadn't reached really critical mass. So coming on Wednesdays, telling your friends about Wednesdays, that kind of thing will help us kind of build up that process. And then we'll probably go back to doing labs. And we'll probably still do labs sometime in the future if Nick has time. We'll find time to make those possible. Even if it's 10 people or 15 people in a breakout room, we'll start to kind of try to build critical mass. So let us know if you're interested in those things. And again, we measure some of the success by who's here on Wednesdays. Like I look down at the number and look at the YouTube numbers and make a decision about, hey, this was successful or not. Today was, and yesterday, last week was with Chris as well. So I think this is something that I think is important, and I think hopefully enough people think it's important that we'll keep doing it. But I think that it's a explosive time, so and it's worth us, understanding what those are. Do I think that we're going to all be in a digital environment in the next year or two? Probably not. Do I think that AR and 3D and Unreal are going to be part of everything that we do for education, for sales, for broadcast? Absolutely. Like it's coming really fast, and it'll eventually grow into something more virtual. But I think that there are so many places it can go before that. Anyway, Nick, hey, thanks for coming. Thanks for stopping.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, we might try to get you on as often as we can. So, and thank you to the producers for the great questions. Keep us going. Thanks to the panelists who make this happen. Without the panelists, there's no office hours. Without the producers, there's no office hours. And without office hours, there's no after hours. There's no nothing. So anyway, so we thank all of you for participating and making this a great show every day. All right. We will we'll talk tomorrow about Todd Raines is going to talk about wood turning. I can't wait. Anyway, so stay tuned for that. And now we're going to jump into After Hours.